I've never told anyone this story, mostly because I'm still not entirely sure how I survived that night. A few years ago, I was a 20-something college student drowning in student loans. To make ends meet, I took up a job as a late-night delivery driver for a well-known app. I preferred the night shifts. The roads were completely empty. The pay was slightly better due to surge pricing, and I didn't have to deal with traffic. But looking back, that isolation is exactly what made me the perfect target. It was a Tuesday in late November, the kind of night where the cold seems to seep through the floorboards of your car and settle directly into your bones. A thick, freezing fog had rolled into the valley, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. It was almost 2:30 a.m., and I was just about ready to turn off the app and head back to my apartment. That's when my phone chimed. A new order. The payout was unusually high, almost $40 for a single delivery from a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The drop-off location, however, was out in the dense, heavily wooded area known as Blackwood Ridge. Against my better judgment, I accepted it. $40 is $40. I picked up the order, a single black coffee and a slice of cherry pie, and started the drive up the mountain. As soon as I left the city limits, the streetlights vanished. It was just me, my headlights cutting through the swirling gray fog, and the endless tunnel of towering pine trees on either side of the narrow asphalt road. About 20 minutes into the drive, my GPS started acting up. The blue line on the screen began to stutter, recalculating rapidly before the map entirely disappeared into a gray grid. No signal. I let out a frustrated sigh, tapping the screen, but it was dead. I remembered the last instruction. Continue on Ridge Road for 4 miles. Then take a left onto an unnamed dirt driveway. I slowed the car down to a crawl, peering through the foggy windshield. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted it. A narrow, unpaved opening between the trees, flanked by 2 crumbling stone pillars. There was no mailbox, no house number, just an overwhelming sense of abandonment. I turned my steering wheel, the tires crunching loudly against the gravel. The driveway was impossibly long, twisting deeper and deeper into the dark woods. Tree branches scraped against the sides of my car like long, wooden fingernails. Finally, the trees cleared, revealing a small, dilapidated 2-story house sitting in a dirt clearing. There wasn't a single light on inside. The windows were pitch black, reflecting my headlights like empty eyes. The entire property looked like it had been abandoned for a decade. I put the car in park, keeping the engine running, and checked the delivery instructions on my app, which had somehow cached the final note. It read, in all caps, "Do not honk. Bring to the back porch. The door is unlocked. Come inside, and leave it on the kitchen table." My heart did a sudden, uncomfortable flip in my chest. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to put the car in reverse and get out of there. No delivery driver goes inside a dark house in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. But then, as I stared at the dark silhouette of the house, I noticed something that made my blood run absolutely cold. A pale, unusually tall figure was standing motionless at the edge of the tree line, just barely illuminated by the glow of my taillights. And it was staring directly at me. Panic hit my system like a physical punch to the gut. I blinked hard, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the fog and the red glare of my taillights. But as I kept my eyes locked on the rearview mirror, the figure shifted. It wasn't an animal. It was a man, or at least something shaped like one, wearing dark, tattered clothing. What terrified me most wasn't just his presence. It was his posture. He was unnaturally still, his arms hanging rigidly at his sides, his head tilted at a steep, broken angle, just watching my car. I immediately reached for the gear shift to throw the car into reverse. To hell with the $40. To hell with the delivery rating. I was leaving, but as my hand grabbed the shifter, a sharp, metallic bang echoed from the trunk of my car. I jumped out of my seat, gasping for air. It sounded like someone had struck the metal with a heavy steel pipe. I whipped my head around, looking through the rear window, but the thick fog obscured everything beyond a few feet. I checked the rearview mirror again. The tall figure standing at the tree line was gone. "Okay, breathe," I whispered to myself, my hands trembling violently on the steering wheel. I shifted into reverse and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. The engine roared, but the car didn't move. The tires just spun furiously, kicking up mud and gravel. I was stuck. In my panic to get away, I hadn't realized that the back tires had sunk into a deep, muddy trench completely hidden by the dark. I was officially stranded in the middle of nowhere, outside an abandoned house, with someone, or something, lurking in the darkness. I grabbed my phone, desperately praying for a sliver of cell service. Nothing, just the dreaded "emergency calls only" banner across the top. Suddenly, the motion sensor light attached to the front porch of the dark house flickered to life. The sudden burst of harsh, yellow light illuminated the front yard. There was no one on the porch, but the heavy, wooden front door, which had been tightly shut just moments ago, was now standing wide open, revealing a hallway swallowed by absolute blackness. My breathing became shallow and erratic. I made sure all the car doors were locked, checking each button twice. I huddled down in the driver's seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. The silence of the woods was deafening. No crickets, no wind, absolutely nothing. Then, my phone screen lit up. The sudden brightness in the dark cabin of the car almost blinded me. It was a notification from the delivery app, even without cell service. The app's internal messaging system had somehow received a ping through a phantom Wi-Fi connection from the house. My hand shook as I swiped to open the message. It was from the customer. "I see you're outside," the message read. A second later, another message popped up. "Why are your doors locked?" A third message followed immediately. "I told you to come to the back porch. I'm waiting for you." Tears of pure terror pricked the corners of my eyes. I looked out the driver's side window, toward the back of the house. From the absolute darkness of the backyard, I heard a sound that I will never be able to erase from my memory. It was a low, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was getting closer to the car. Someone was walking out of the pitch black, tapping a heavy metal object against the side of the house as they approached. And then, a shadow fell over my driver's side window. The tapping stopped. For 3 agonizing seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, a massive, deafening crash shattered the night. The driver's side window exploded inward. A shower of safety glass rained down on my lap and hit my face. I screamed, throwing my arms up to protect my eyes. Pressing my back so hard against the passenger seat, I thought the leather would rip. A hand reached through the broken window. It was wearing a thick, stained leatherwork glove. The fingers blindly groped around the inside of the door panel, feeling for the lock switch. I didn't wait to see the face attached to that arm. Pure, unadulterated adrenaline flooded my system. I scrambled over the center console, kicking the gear shift by accident, and slammed my shoulder against the passenger door. I fumbled with the lock, popped it open, and tumbled out into the freezing mud. I hit the ground hard, twisting my ankle, but I didn't feel the pain. I scrambled to my feet, my shoes slipping in the wet dirt. I looked back at the car for a fraction of a second. A massive silhouette was now leaning entirely into the driver's side of my vehicle. I had 2 choices: run into the pitch black, woods where I couldn't see my own hands in front of my face, or run toward the only source of light, the open front door of the seemingly abandoned house. Running into the woods meant getting lost and freezing to death, or worse, being hunted in the dark. The house, horrifying as it was, had walls. Maybe a weapon, maybe a landline phone. I bolted for the porch. My lungs burned with the freezing fog as I sprinted across the overgrown yard. I leaped up the rotting wooden steps, ignoring the loud creaks, and threw myself through the open front doorway. I grabbed the heavy oak door and slammed it shut behind me. My hands frantically searched the edge of the door for a deadbolt. I found a rusted metal latch and forced it into place just as I heard heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel outside, moving away from my car and toward the house. I backed away from the door, my chest heaving, trying to be as quiet as possible. The inside of the house smelled like mold, stale cigarettes, and copper. It was pitch black in the hallway, but a faint, bluish glow was spilling out from a room at the end of the corridor. Thud! Something heavy struck the front door. I covered my mouth with both hands to stifle a sob. Thud! Thud! They were testing the door. The wood groaned, but the rusted latch held. Then, a horrifyingly calm voice spoke from the other side of the wood. It was entirely muffled, but the tone was conversational, almost polite. "I know you're in there. You forgot your tip." I didn't answer. I took a step back, my wet shoes squeaking slightly on the hardwood floor. I had to find a back exit. I turned and crept toward the room with the blue glow. my hands trailing along the peeling wallpaper to keep my balance in the dark. I reached the doorway of the glowing room and peeked inside. What I saw made my stomach drop into a bottomless pit. This wasn't an abandoned living room. It was a makeshift surveillance center. For large, older model flat screen. Monitors were set up on a folding table in the center of the room. The blue glow was coming from the screens. Cables were everywhere, snaking across the dirty floor and plugged into a humming generator in the corner. But it was the footage on the screens that completely paralyzed me. Monitor 1 showed a live feed of the driveway. My car was sitting there, the driver's side door still hanging open. Monitor 2 showed the dark tree line where I had first seen the tall figure. Monitor 3 was a camera pointed directly at the front porch. I could see the top of a person's head standing right outside the door I had just locked. And Monitor 4 showed the inside of the diner I had picked the food up from. It was a recorded loop, showing me walking up to the counter, grabbing the black coffee and the cherry pie, and walking out. They hadn't just lured me here. They had been watching me from the moment I accepted the order. This was highly premeditated. It was a trap built specifically for whoever took that delivery. On the table next to the keyboards, there were dozens of Polaroid pictures scattered around. I forced myself to step closer, my eyes scanning the photos. They were pictures of other delivery drivers, some standing on this exact porch, some walking back to their cars, some taken from inside their cars, completely unaware that someone was in the back seat. A sharp scrape of metal against wood snapped me out of my trance. I looked at Monitor 3. The figure on the porch was no longer just standing there. They had pulled a long, heavy crowbar from their coat and were sliding it into the gap between the door and the frame. They were going to pry the door open. It wouldn't take more than a minute. I frantically scanned the room for a weapon. Nothing but keyboards and empty energy drink cans. I looked at the back wall and saw a narrow hallway leading to what looked like a kitchen. The delivery instructions echoed in my mind. Bring to the back porch. Leave it on the kitchen table. If there was a back porch, there was a back door. I ran as silently as I could into the kitchen. The smell of copper was overwhelmingly strong here. The moonlight cutting through. A dirty window revealed a heavy metal door at the back. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I felt for a deadbolt. There wasn't one. It required a key from the inside. It was a double-cylinder lock. I was trapped. A massive splintering sound echoed from the front of the house. The front door had given way. Heavy boots stepped onto the hardwood floor of the hallway. The stalker was inside. Delivery, the voice called out. It echoed through the empty house. It wasn't a yell. It was a sing-song whisper, mocking me. I dropped to the floor, crawling behind a massive, rusted kitchen island. My mind was racing. I couldn't fight. I couldn't run out the back. I looked around desperately. Near the baseboards, half hidden by a pile of rotting cardboard boxes, I saw a wooden grate, a return air vent for a floor heating system, or maybe a crawlspace access. The heavy boots were walking slowly down the hallway. Step, pause, step, pause. They were checking the rooms. I scrambled to the grate, prying at the wooden slats with my bleeding fingers. It was old and loose. With a sickeningly loud crack, the grate popped off. I froze, terrified that the sound had given me away. The footsteps in the hallway stopped. Did you drop my pie? The voice asked, much closer now. They were right outside the kitchen. I shoved myself feet first into the dark hole in the wall. The space was impossibly tight, smelling of dust and dead mice. I shimmied backward, pulling the wooden grate back into place just as a tall, imposing shadow stretched across the kitchen floor. I held my breath. I closed my eyes tightly, as if not seeing them would mean they couldn't see me. Through the slats of the grate, I watched the boots enter the kitchen. They were heavy, steel-toed work boots, covered in wet mud. The person walked around the kitchen island. They stopped exactly where I had been standing moments before. I could hear their breathing, heavy, rhythmic, almost excited. They dragged the tip of the crowbar against the dirty linoleum floor, creating a terrible, screeching noise that made my teeth ache. I see the mud on the floor, the voice whispered. You're getting the house all dirty. The boots slowly walked toward the back door. They paused. Then, they turned directly toward the pile of cardboard boxes hiding my vent. My heart was beating so violently against my ribs. I was certain the stalker could hear it.